Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today I have multimedia producer Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen and I used to work on the James Altucher Show podcast. Steve works in the podcasting industry. He's worked in radio. He's worked in television. This is the most in touch, networked guy I know. This guy knows everybody. He's met everybody. He can talk about every subject matter. He's very well read. You know, it's hard to find people who can just drop a literary reference and you get it. Or I can drop a literary reference and he gets it. I mean, what's best guest to have on this? And I'm so happy he's here. I wish he had been my first guest, but it didn't work out that way. But he's here now for the first of what will hopefully be very many installments of me shooting the shit with Steve Cohen. And just to give you some context about why I'm so excited about this. Because I shoot the shit with Steve Cohen all the time, right? We walk around Manhattan, pandemic or not, and we just shoot the shit. In the pandemic, we got our masks on and we try to stay 6 feet apart, but we just walk around and we're shooting the shit. When we're not in a pandemic, we're walking around and we're shooting the shit. And so much of these conversations that we have, I'm always like, damn, I wish other people were hearing this. This is inspiring stuff. This is useful information. This is something I would like to bring onto to a podcast. When I first started having these thoughts, I didn't have this podcast. Now I have this podcast, and now I have Steve Cohen on the podcast, so we can shoot the shit with Steve Cohen. Here's episode 1 of Shooting the Shit with Steve Cohen. All right, everybody, kicking off the month of February, I have the one, the only, the first guest I wanted, but didn't get immediately, but I finally got him on here. This is the guy, the producer extraordinaire, Steve Cohen. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very, very much. I'm so excited, Eric, and flattered, honored, and excited to speak with you.
All right. Hold on a sec. Let me just... Can you talk again?
You want to keep talking? Oh, hi. I'm putting sanitizer on my hands. It was cheapo. Cool. I bought it at Target. It was peppermint flavored, which is an acquired taste. It was after Christmas. So that's why it's...
At least you found some.
Oh, yeah.
There's some parts of the country that can't.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't have the supply.
It was like 80% off, and it happened to be peppermint. So...
How you feeling, Steve?
I feel good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I feel good. I'm like Snoop Dogg, toned, tan, fit, and ready. I've been down in Florida a few times.
What you doing down there?
I was visiting my parents who live down there. I mean, as much as I'm reluctant to travel, obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I felt like it was important to see them, so I tried to go on flights where there weren't as many people on it, and I've been fortunate to go on flights that have like 75 seats opened and trying to reduce risk,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's probably why you see me a little bit tan.
Well, so far you haven't gotten sick, which makes me super happy.
Oh, yeah. I've been tested a number of times. I mean, I've been tested 6 or 7 times, and I think that I'm sure you've face this. We all know people who passed from COVID, we know people who've had it. Obviously, more people are dying per day than died at 9/11. I mean, we all know those statistics, but I think that also there's probably a psychology that feels like, okay, I haven't gotten it already, but okay, so that you feel like it's conferred some sort of immunity, or you have pandemic fatigue, or you feel like the worst is past us. And so I keep trying to remind myself. So, hopefully I could stay COVID free, and you too, obviously.
Yeah, I made it a policy since testing became available to test every 2 weeks, no matter what. And then if I have like a close call or a weird encounter, I'll throw in an extra test. So I had a close call. Like, we were really worried because there was somebody who I had been in a room with who had been in a room with somebody who tested positive and was really, really sick.
Wow.
And luckily, neither of us got sick, but this fucking asshole didn't disclose it to her until after he had recovered.
Wow.
And he didn't report it, through the app like you're supposed to. And so there was nobody who was able to call this person ahead of time. So this person just assumed that this person was being responsible and all that. And yeah, you can't trust people, even if you think you can. And unless they say, you know, I've been tested 6 or 7 times. All right, cool.
Yeah, I definitely been tested a lot. And when I came in, I'd come into New York, they make you fill out those forms. Now, technically, I could have filled it out, said I'm Alfred E. Newman, and I didn't think they were really checking. But I did it, and I was glad. And yeah, it's for the benefit of everybody else. I'm not saying I'm the citizen of the year. You know, I probably, if Donald Trump was a 1, as far as like vigilance, and Anthony Fauci's a 9 or 10, I was probably a 7, maybe a 6. Like, I do think we all have to assume some risk in life. You know, I found some people were particularly concerned about it. I think a lot of it's your personality, right? If it's, you know, I know people around me who are type A people and achievers, and the kind of people who are great students and really worried about stuff. And that is why they were great students. They always wanted to get an A, or they always wanted to follow rules, and they were concerned. And again, I don't begrudge them that. I think that's great, you know, and I think I probably need to have more of that there. You know, so one stitch in time saves 9, and I definitely feel that way. But I do think, you know, you could drive yourself a little bit crazy, you know, and some of it reminded me of when people go to Mexico and they're so loath to drink the water there, but then they'll order a margarita and have, you know, ice cubes in it with it. So like there is going to be some risk, and particularly after 10 months or 11 months, you know, you have to assume some risk in life. You and I are sitting over here, like, you know, together, and one of us could have been exposed. You know, yes, I had my peppermint sanitizer and you have yours, and we were wearing masks, and but so I think yeah, and I think as a broader situation, obviously as a country, if we all did it, you know, we'd be a lot better off. And that, without going on a tangent, and I know I've shown the remarkable propensity to keep talking without being interrupted.
That's why you're here.
But
That's why you're here.
You know that old joke, like, oh, one time I didn't talk to Steve for 2 months. I didn't want to interrupt him, you know. But I think that,
So true.
But I think that, you know, there's an interesting article in the New York Times about Donald Trump, and how we saw the pandemic as related to him. You know, and I think these people will follow him. If he told them to wear masks, they would have worn masks.
Yeah.
And, you know, it wouldn't have been perceived as wimpy or, you know, falling into, you know, an authoritarian regime, or just, you know, they would have felt like, okay, you know, okay, this is the right thing to do. We're patriots, so it's patriotic to protect your country, you know. So, yeah, so I think we all could do better. I'll do better too.
All right, so that's good. That's a good start. Let's go back to earlier in the pandemic. We both had the floor, what we thought was a solid floor we were standing on, pulled
Correct.
out from under us.
Yes.
We don't need to go into the details.
No, we don't need to go into details.
But I wanted to talk about that because you came full circle. I mean, you're Steve Cohen proper,
Yeah.
but you weren't all summer. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, please. I think, well, I'm glad, you know, I felt, you know, for me, I think like a lot of people during the pandemic, I thought it was a challenge, and you were there right with me, and we both, probably had the rug pulled underneath us. And I think as you get older, and I've been at this business for a long time, and you know, and as you know, I'm very fond of quotes. I made a real point to just live up to that. And I think that I remember when that happened in March, and I felt that, okay, you know, all those expressions I was so fond of, I'd had to adhere to. And some of them are, events aren't good or bad, they're neutral. You can't control your circumstance, you can control your decisions. Don't wish you were easier, wish you were better. Don't curse the darkness, light a candle. You know, and I felt like all of those things were true. I think things work out best for those who make the best of the way things work out. I thought, you know, it's the old Mike Tyson line, everybody gets, punched in the face. I mean, everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. And so for me, I looked around and I felt like, okay, all things considered, I'm doing pretty well. I have a lot of friends, a lot of family. My personal relationship was going well. Professional might not have been, but I wasn't alone. 40 million people lost their jobs, and the economy was horrible. People who worked as primary caregivers or first responders, they had it a lot worse. Or, so I felt like I didn't want to waste too much time on feeling sorry for myself. And I think I spent over 2 decades working in radio and television and in podcasting. And I've been fortunate to be around some really great thinkers and inspiring people, and I thought about Amy Morin, your fellow native of Maine, who had written a terrific book called 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. And I literally went through it and said, okay, mentally strong people don't dwell on the past, or you're not afraid of taking change, or you don't blame other people for your issues, or you're not afraid of taking risks. And I really took it to heart, and I checked to see, am I doing those things, and other people's hindsight could be my foresight,
Can you put the mic stand on that?
Oh yeah, of course.
Thanks, man.
We both worked with, James Altucher, who was terrific. I mean, he bounced back from a lot of very tough situations, and so success leaves clues. And he was able to, go into a situation where he had lost millions of dollars, wanted to kill himself, and bounce back. And he talked about how he bounced back. And obviously, working with him closely for 3 years, I was able to see how he did it. And, I think, so I thought that was very helpful. I think people like Tony Robbins, whatever you want to say about them, I liked how he would always say, look at the situation, don't make it any worse than it is, don't make it any better than it is. So if I'm trying to lose weight, I'm not like, oh my God, I'm so heavy. How am I ever going to do it? I never seem to lose weight. I never, and, or I'm not going to be like, well, I'm only a few pounds overweight. No, like, look at it how it is. And the situation was, a place where I was very comfortable. I was no longer working there. And, and I felt like, okay, I'm going to make this work. And I'm not going to waste time feeling sorry for myself. I'm not going to cast aspersions on anybody. I'm going to focus and have faith rather than fear, and just keep at it, and try and find people that are around you that are going to help you, and use it as an opportunity to grow. And, I think that adversity is a good thing. It helps you. I've heard the quote, like, adversity is great because it helps you discover yourself free from admirers. And it was good. And so I tried to make the most of the situation.
Yeah. Just to give some context on what you do, because we never really introduced your profession, but so you mentioned James Altucher. We met working on the James Altucher show together. And, you have a lot more experience, though. You've worked on a lot of podcasts. You've worked with a lot of broadcasters in radio and television.
Yeah.
You've been around the block. And it's just, it's interesting, though, to see how you've sort of almost formed your own. I mean, you've formed your own enterprise in between then and now.
Yeah.
And started building up your client list, even though the pandemic isn't over. And I love that. I love just being able to take the reins of your own life, your own business, your own profession. Say, all right, you know what? I'm not going to be able to work in the sort of format or the context that I'm used to, but that doesn't mean I can't work. Like,
no, thank you. I appreciate it. No, and I think sometimes, like, a different perspective really helps, in that I may not see it, but, like George Bernard Shaw said, the only person who behaves sensibly is my tailor. He remeasures me every time he sees me. And so I think that, I could look back and say I've grown a lot, and I did all of those things. I kind of just said, okay, I'm not going to make it any better than it is. I'm not going to make it any worse than it is. I'm going to handle it. I'm effective at this. This is why I did all this time. And allow yourself to make mistakes. I made mistakes past 9-10 months. I had a group of people around me that were very helpful to me, people who had already done it. I think successful people seek counsel, not opinions. I think that I tried to speak to people who started their own business. My sister was very helpful. My girlfriend was helpful. I think, my parents were helpful. There were people who supported me, but I think, and then I found people that, hopefully you find the right people to work with, where, you have to find people that, believe in you, want what's best for you, and everything could be a win-win. And I think, like, as you go through it, Warren Buffett famously said, who's not wearing shorts when the tide goes out, about the Bernard Madoff story. And I think that like you learn when you're in a tough situation, who's there for you, who's not there for you, and hopefully you could use it to get better and to look at it like, wow, oh my God, this is a great opportunity. And I felt that way. I wasn't just saying it for myself. I felt that way, and I felt like, okay, I'm gonna regroup. I'm gonna settle down. This is a good opportunity, and yeah. I mean, I think that Ben Horowitz wrote one of my favorite books called "The Hard Thing About Hard Things," and ostensibly he's saying it's hard. It's hard to start a business. It's hard not to start a business. It's hard to make a lot of money. It's hard to have a lot of employees. It's hard to fire somebody. And so when you recognize that, I think is very helpful. And the football coach Nick Saban always likes to talk about how he likes, the book. He likes, and I'm butchering it, but just a book where the first line is like, life is unfair, and if once you realize that anything that happens, you're kind of like, okay, it's fine. I could readjust and deal with it. And yeah, so I think I took solace in it. And I think the bigger thing that I probably really learned, is like, when something happens to you, you have to, like Kamal Ravikant, who I'm a big fan of, always talked about, things don't happen to you, they happen for you. Yeah. And he talked about loving yourself, or being in a situation where you kind of have faith and you say, if I love myself, would I do this? And I think that, to be honest with you, I felt good. I mean, I felt like, okay, a lot of people approached me. I was always effective at what I did. And then I had to learn some of the nuts and bolts and about, like, how much do I charge? How do I do a contract? And I got help from those things. And I realized, like, these problems are solvable. And I think initially my mindset shifted. I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's book Mindset, where premise is that you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And back in March, right during the pandemic, I probably had a fixed mindset. Okay, I just want to keep making what I was making, and if I could do this, this, and this. And then I felt like, well, maybe I could do twice as good than I ever did, or 3 times, or 4 times, and feel better. Or maybe there are other metrics to success, like peace of mind, or relationships, or personal life. And some of those things I probably didn't give myself permission to pursue. So yeah. So I think it's been great. And I really do feel that way. And when you change the way you see things, the things you see will change.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the. I mean, there's a lot we can go.
And you know me, like we fortunately, listeners, like, I had a chance to work with Eric, and a lot of times we'd be on the Upper West Side, and he was going home. So I always try to walk with people. It's probably the only thing I have in common with Steve Jobs other than my name, but he used to like to walk with people. And I always prefer to go on walks with people rather than, sit down, have lunch, or have drinks. I'm not a big drinker. I know I have a propensity to overeat, and so I'd much rather go for a walk. And here in New York City, you have Central Park, you have Riverside Park. Just even walking on the streets, it's great. So we would go for walks, and we'd get to know each other. And I got to know you as a very talented, creative person, but also somebody you could talk to. And I think it helped. It helped, me. But anyway, yeah, I think that
Well, I thought
that this is like some people go on podcasts and they try and act a certain way, and I've always just been fairly much like, hey, what you see is what you get. This is kind of who I am, for better, for worse.
Yeah. Well, for the walking, I always saw walking as a great way to decompress anyway, into like process the day, process any changes that were happening, things like that. But then also like going back to the thing where like you were going through all of your contacts and like talking with people, and it was almost it reminds me of when my sister had her divorce, and she was rebuilding her tribe from scratch,
Right.
trying to figure out who's in her tribe and who isn't. And that's kind of what it reminded me of. And I think that's a lot of people in this year have been going through that and are going to continue to go through that until we find our way back to some level of normality, or a new normality. Because I too was in that locked mindset. I'm like, all right, I'm doing good. I'm building my technological capabilities with this really decent income that I'm making. And then it all stopped. And then I had to shift from that locked mindset. What did you call it? You said it was a locked mindset?
A fixed mindset.
Fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of recalibrate. But I do this thing where like I double down. So like if I get resistance from the world with what I want to do, with the direction I'm going, I tend to double down. So if I get resistance when I'm making a film, I double down on that film. If I get resistance,
You lean into it.
I lean in harder. If I get resistance wanting to do this podcast or any podcast, I lean in harder. If somebody says no, I go after them even harder.
Yeah.
Like I don't just let the world affect me. I almost move with the breeze. Like,
I think that's
I'm thinking of the scene in The Matrix where the guy flips backwards,
And yeah, it's funny because I like Tom Bilyeu a lot, who's a big proponent of Professor Carol Dweck's book Mindset, and he gives it to everybody, like all his guests and people over there, and he has a very good podcast, Impact Theory. But I think that, so I think, but it's funny because the reason why I thought of Tom right now is he always talks about the movie The Matrix, which you just talked about, which I really haven't seen. Like everybody thinks I've seen so many movies because I quote them a lot, but I just remember the ones I've seen. And he talks about the red pill or
the red
blue pill,
yeah.
and there's a lot of good metaphors for that. But I don't listen. I think so much of life is the story you tell yourself, and obviously I've been in the podcast space for a while, and I always enjoyed listening to them, and I think I'm the beneficiary from having heard so many of them and having been involved with them. And I think that, I think it's very, very instructive to me about, again, the story you tell yourself and in any story, right? Like you can look at David versus Goliath, right? And people are like, wow, this is really a David versus Goliath story. And if you're David, you're like, great, David won, So I think it's a lot like the story you tell yourself, how you're doing it, and I think that you can work things into existence. But I also think that, I think that there's a process and there's a way to do things. And I think that before, I think it was probably easier to make excuses or the story you tell yourself. And I think, it's not just like from March, like I would say, when I'd worked in television for a long time, and like a lot of people worked in corporations, and I think it was hard for me, and for me personally, other people might be different, to really self-actualize, because you're dealing with a company, you're dealing with a corporation, you're dealing with a lot of resistance every day, you're dealing with a group of people around that you have to collaborate with, but you might be competitive with. And, and it's a situation where maybe they don't want you to succeed as much because it's more of a scarcity kind of mindset, and it's a place where you're always defensive, and and so for me, it was a situation where like, okay, I was effective in TV. It probably helped me. It certainly in radio. It helped me get where I am now. I'm known for somebody who knows a lot of people, and having a big network, and that helped me develop it. But I think that I was good at it. Being in TV feeds your ego. I'm a people pleaser. There's a lot of deadlines. And so when I left TV, I felt like I had 50 to 60 hours a week that I didn't have. And I felt like, wow, I could do all of these things. And I didn't have to do certain things. I didn't have to get up at 5 or 6 in the morning. I didn't have to, do a story that I didn't, in TV news, there's so many deadlines. And I was effective at it and probably helped me, once I left it, because like the movie Dodgeball says, if you could dodge a wrench, you could dodge a ball. And it's almost like being on the batter check with 2 bats, and then when you only have 1 bat. So it really steeled me up for what I'm doing now. But it definitely helped me deal with the way it is now. But I was effective. Like you'd have breaking news and you felt like you didn't have a sense of control because you'd go in there and the story you tell yourself, it could be that it's exciting, but it was also you didn't feel like you had a lot of control. Like you wound up missing a lot of stuff because you'd have to fly for a tornado or a school shooting or a convention, and you looked at it every day, like, and you had to get it done. And I was good at it, and I had that adrenaline, and I enjoyed it. But then afterwards, then I was able to say, okay, no, I could do this now because, hey, there's no reason why I shouldn't be doing these things. So I think it's been good. Yeah.
There's an interesting story you once told me that I was wondering if you'd be open to telling it to the audience of the podcast. You talked about, and this is of course my obsession with movies about the media. Sure. I've always been obsessed with movies about the media. Is Rachel McAdams followed you around?
Oh yeah, that was very fun. That was such a cool day.
You were the template for her character.
No, I don't know if I was a template, but I mean,
I think you were. All right, so
that was a fun story.
That was from Morning Glory.
Yeah. She came from Morning Glory, and when I was at the CBS Early Show, we used to tape at the General Motors building or right by the Apple's building, and one day the actress Rachel McAdams came to the studio, and I remember, and she was just standing outside, and I remember seeing like a very striking woman, and I was telling the stage manager, I'm like, who's she? And he's like, she's like some actress. She's preparing for a role, and she asked if she could hang out with us. And so I remember saying, wait a minute, that's Rachel McAdams from Wedding Crashers and Notebook and all that, and Mean Girls. And so then when she was there, it was really, I remember just like, whether a beautiful woman appeals to you, whether it's a celebrity, whether it's just a nice person or a fun person. So she was following me and some other producers around that day, and she was unbelievable. I thought she was just such a nice person and just fun. And I remember, to be honest, like I was joking around with her a lot, just coming up with lines from like Wedding Crashers. And I remember saying, like what Owen Wilson said to her, he said, in the movie, her character, he said, I'm not saying you should marry me. I'm just saying don't marry him. So she wanted to know all about news, and she went to like our morning meeting. And I remember that morning meeting, there was a story about a kid who was drowning in a pool and was miraculously saved, and she was at the morning meeting. I remember Maggie Rodriguez, the host, was like, why is Rachel McAdams here? Because she was just standing there. And I thought it was very impressive that she just was unassuming and came by herself. And I remember that particular story, maybe I was performing because she was there, but I remember saying, like, they were like, well, it's a great story about pool safety. Like the kid, he's drowning in the pool, and, and so they were like, we have footage. And I was like, why don't we just recreate it? Why don't we just have him drown again? And I also remember, like, I was joking with her, and she had a good sense of humor. And at one point she like said something to me, and I said, let me ask you a question. So when they were looking to do Mean Girls, you weren't like, I'm going to go to high school and follow around some really abusive kids. You were probably like, I don't even need to do this. I was born to play this role. I don't even need to prepare. And I thought, yes, I thought it was pretty funny. But I remember, and I remember even going to the premiere of that movie, seeing her and Harrison Ford and Sigourney Weaver, the other actresses. No, I think it was Diane Keaton in that movie. And Harry Smith, the anchor, said, Steve, do you want me to go reintroduce you to them? And I was like, no, I got this. I don't need you to co-sign my checks. You'll remember. And she was very nice. She was like, oh my God, you were so much fun. Thank you. And just very nice person. And I thought how you do anything is how you do everything. And I thought it was very just compelling that she just went by herself, and she just was standing there and wanted to learn. And I thought it was great. Just a very nice person. And that was one of the very cool things about TV, and that was one thing I remember. And I have a lot of fond memories of my 10 years at the early show, and 5 years at Good Day New York, and 3 years in local, 3 years in network radio, 5 years in local radio. I'm the kind of person who, I've talked about this when I talked with James. I think insecure people network, insecure people have contacts and network. Insecure people offer their friendship. They want to work with you. They want to make it a win-win. Yeah. It's not for me to just be like, oh, let me text this person. I may need them. I'm confident. I think maybe we can work together. Maybe I could help you. Maybe we could both. And I want people to feel that way. I want people to feel like it's a win-win and we could do well. And I probably don't do it as effectively as I could, even though most people would assume like I am pretty together with people, but I try and just treat people the way I'd want to be treated. If people reach out to me, I try and get back to them and friends, and that's what life is about. That's what you realize, during this pandemic, even more so, right? Like where people really miss human contact, or a college friend will call me and they'll be like, it was so great that we did that Zoom, or, and those kind of situations. And that's how people measure happiness, like the relationships you have,
You had, when we were working for James, you had a really good sort of almost philosophy about what it takes to sort of get somebody on the podcast, because one of your main roles was getting guests, and negotiating their time. And what I might get this wrong, but how many touches does it take? You talk about how
for sure,
in terms of touches.
I think that it could take as many as 16. It could take 5. It could take 10. And I think whatever it takes, you should do. But I'd rather reach out to 10 people once than one person 10 times. Yeah. And I think there's a psychology involved in doing it. And I think that I do this now. I do this with everybody I work with. I think that you can't control the wind. You can control the size of your sails. I'm not going to spray and pray. I'm going to try. If I'm going after something, I'm going to, like I would joke to people, oh, if I'm going after Moby Dick, I bring tartar sauce. But I think you need to have a sense of confidence, and you need to feel like, hey, you deserve this. Like, hey, they should do this. If they don't, that's okay. But I'm it's my time too. And John Wooden used to say, I'm no better than anybody else, but I'm just as good as everybody else. And I think that, yes, I think persistence beats resistance, and I would follow up, and I would, and it depends on who that person is. Like that person, if you keep reaching out to them, they may think like this guy's desperate or he's annoying, or they may think like, wow, they really want me on the program, and I think there's a way to do it, and I think there's a way to ask, and I think that you should be thinking about, my friend Nick always talks about what's the biggest radio station in the world? And he says it's WIIFM, what's in it for me? And so I am thinking about what's in it for that other person. And here's what it's in for you. We have X amount of downloads. This person's a really good interviewer. He's going to ask you good questions. He's not going to take cheap shots. It's going to be something else you can use. It won't take up too much of your time. I mean, why do people say yes? So in my mind, I'm thinking of getting them to yes. and what it's going to take them to get to yes. And I always was effective at doing it, because when I was booking guests on a show, I would say, how do you get people to a party? You invite them early. You invite them often. You be a good host. You tell them who else is going to be at that party. So in the case of James, we were fortunate to have Sonia Sotomayor on, or Mike Ovitz, or Eric Schmidt, or Richard Branson, and those people were elusive. And it gave him credibility, and it gave us credibility. And okay, you don't want to do it? You know, we wish you would. We really like you. We think we would do a good interview with you. But if you don't, then okay, maybe later. You know, and so I think, again, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And as a corollary to that, so I would say there's probably 5 things. You know, like, be a good host. You know, let them know who else is at the party. Invite them early. Invite them often. But know what other parties they're going to. You know, when I was in radio at WCBS Radio, I remember one time I was taking the subway. I lived Upper West Side, and I see this very handsome guy, and he's wearing a pinstripe suit, and he's got like a Rolex watch on, and I'm looking at him thinking, that looks like JFK Jr., but if it's, you know, and I said, well, I don't know. But I said, I know Hachette, his magazine George, was at 50th and Broadway, so if he gets off at 50th, I'm following him. And so I did, you know, and I got off. I said, hey, John, Steve Cohen from CBS, from WCBS Radio. I thought, you know, I work on the morning show over there. I would love to have you talk about George. And he says, well, I'm really not doing a lot of interviews. And I said, well, I heard you not do I Miss this morning. He goes, why? There was just one I did, you know? And so I think that's an example of like how you, obviously luck is when preparation meets opportunity, but I think it's also a question of knowing what else they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so like they're gaining residual respect for you, saying, okay, this guy invested in me a little bit, you know, and it's not just, you know. And I also remember he was very nice, and I remembered asking him, because I had seen Larry King ask George Bush, you know, to see his license. And I just said, he goes, okay, well, I'll let you know, my partner, and I said, well, do you have a card? And I wanted his card. I just thought it'd be funny. He was going like through his pockets. He didn't have it. And I said, I know where to reach you. Don't worry. And I did actually wind up seeing him shortly thereafter at like the correspondence dinner. He had Larry Flint of Hustler as his guest at his table. So, but super nice person. I don't know him, but I remember thinking though that you should do things that, in order to be successful, you should do stuff that everybody else is doing and do stuff that they're not gonna do. And so,
one of the things I've been struggling with, because I'm now learning how to do what you do.
You have to.
And you do it so expertly. And I'd say 2/3 of the people I reach out to be on my podcast, it'll either be a hard no or they'll just ghost the communication.
Oh, interesting.
And then 1/3.
Sorry.
That's okay. 1/3 will be, and this is, I'm only communicating this in case other people are dealing with this too. And
Please.
I want them to understand that it's normal. The final third is either a yes or it's, I'm interested, but I can't do it now. And there's an indication that they want to keep a relationship opportunity.
Right.
So for example, when I reached out to Stephen Pressfield, the author of War of Art,
right,
his publisher said that he can't do it right now because he's in a project, and then proceeded to send me his latest book. Like that to me is a tentative yes at some point. That's wanting to keep the relationship open. Also, I reached out to one of my favorite authors. I won't name her right now, but she basically said she's interested, but because of everything that's going on, it'd be hard to make time. That to me is a tentative yes. But I'm now in the process of navigating those hard no's because I don't want them to be hard no's.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I think that and that's, I guess, what you're referring to about like touches. And so, again, I always tell people, you want to be useful to people, you don't want to use them. And people know when like you're manipulating them. And it's like, I used to deal with publicists all the time. Now, technically for some of my clients, I'm playing that role. And it's like, I just want to be genuine. And a fast no, though, is the next best thing to a yes. that there's a lot of different, like Jay-Z says, there's a million ways to get it, and I agree. Like maybe you want them on the podcast. Maybe you could do some film work for them. You're an excellent videographer. There's a lot of different things you could have for them. So your next touch shouldn't be like, okay, please come on again. Please, please, please. Because no, it could be like, hey, no, you said no. I mean, I've done that before too. Like I remember when I was at WCBS Radio, and I did it for a long time. And I think like, I was always effective. And obviously if you want something bad enough, you could do it and you could figure out a way to do it. But I remember, there was a story about, and humor works a lot. I mean, but I remember dealing with Sydney Biddle Barrows, who was the Mayflower Madam. And she had all these prostitutes at the Mayflower Hotel, which is another Trump hotel on 62nd and Broadway. And I was calling her. It was a story about Heidi Fleiss, who was the daughter of a doctor in Beverly Hills. And she had this black book, and she had all these, call girls. I mean, she had Charlie Sheen in her book, a lot of other famous people. And so everybody wanted to talk about like the secret world of prostitution or call girls. And so Sydney Biddle Barrows was this famous woman at the time, or infamous woman. So I remember calling her, and she's like, "Thanks so much, Steve. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf." And I said, "Why don't you turn over a new leaf tomorrow and do our show today?" She's like, "Thank you. I appreciate it." And I think like for me, I always tried to be like Derek Jeter, where he would say, sometimes you get beat and sometimes you lose. And sometimes I'll do different things. Like people would hang up on you, and I would call them right back and say, "Hey, you hung up so quickly that you didn't even get my phone number. And I know sometimes I hang up so quickly and reflexively, and then I'm thinking, wait, I really did want to do that, but I wouldn't know how to get back to them." And sometimes it actually works. People appreciate your persistence, but I think you always have to be looking into it. Like, why should they do it? And for you right now, the value proposition could be that you're great. You could help them in a lot of other areas. You're a bright guy, a thoughtful interviewer, and they're going to enjoy kind of speaking to somebody who could enrich them. It's not going to be because you're Joe Rogan, And
I don't want to be.
No, but you know what I mean.
You want a joint?
But you know what I mean. Like people are going to go on Joe Rogan agnostically, thinking like, okay, well the guy's got 90 million downloads a month or whatever he has, and so. But he doesn't get everybody he wants either. I know for a fact, like there are a lot of people he'd want to go on. And here's a guy who's probably done 2,000 of them. And so...
Well, I think, too, there's a component of the guests wanting to feel like they're in a safe environment. Like they're not going to get the gotchas and all that stuff. You know who my dream guest is?
Who?
And it comes with a dream topic.
Okay.
Caroline Kennedy, since you brought up her brother, talking just for 2 hours, reminiscing about what it was like being raised by her mom.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'd love to listen to that.
Yeah, I don't even know how much.
I never see her do press. I mean, I know she's involved, especially on the education side of like, New York City education system, but like, and I had the wonderful moment of seeing her once on a street on the Upper East Side.
Wow.
But yeah, I know I've read a lot of books kind of about her and her family, and she's my dream guest. That's the dream subject that I would love to have, like a 2 hour, just hear her talk about the memories of growing up with her mom.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Has nothing to do with film. It has nothing to do with the arts. It's just like it's.
Well, Neil Diamond, didn't he write Sweet Caroline about her?
Oh, is that who it's about?
Yes.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
That works. Because I know that like there's a bio about her called Sweet Caroline. That I know.
And that's very, very cool. And I think and I give you credit, like with anybody, like to do this. And I think like for everybody listening out there, there's so many reasons to say no to do things, right? Yeah. Well, why should I do one? Or, hey, I'm not getting a lot of listeners. Hey, but I'm not getting a lot of listeners. Or, hey, it costs a lot of money. Or, hey, I need to do this. And I think you do, like Phil Knight said, just do it and focus and get better and better and better and not compare. And I think there's the power of suggestion. And I felt that way. I felt like everywhere I went, when I was at WCBS Radio when I started out and I was young, it wasn't because, wow, I was at WCBS Radio. I think it's like anybody. Like, if you're a model, some people can wear clothes and look better than others. Like, I felt like I was a producer, and producers produce things, and they know how to get things done. And it's not, wasn't because I was at CBS. I still always feel like there's so few people anywhere you go who are able to move other people, who are difference makers. And I wanted to be a difference maker. There are people who are tractors who pull other people, and there are trailers, the people who kind of go with them. And there are people who are insecure enough where they need that association with another place. And it should be like, hey, here's what we could do. We have a good program, and know what you're selling and think about what you're selling. And, anybody I've worked with, I'm able to expound on what they're selling, make them more attractive. So if it's like fishing, right? Okay. First of all, you just have to fish, right? Yeah. And if you wait forever to get the best bait, the best fishing rod or whatever, but you can tinker and say, okay, what if I use this lure? What if I use this rod? Tinkering. Or, but do you know what I mean? Like, and I think, and for me, I was like that too. And you make, I remember I had these friends I'm very grateful to. Like, I think any friend or people around you, your friends share things with you and expose you to new things. So in an intimacy of a podcast, you want people to share things with you and expose you to things. And I remember I had these friends who were younger, they were fitter, and they exposed me to like rock climbing and surfing. And I remember the first time they took me surfing, they were determined to go surfing. And I was like, it's raining. Why don't we do another day? And they were like, no, it's okay. I'm like, I wear glasses. I'm like, and my glasses are going to fall off. Well, you could buy these like yellow things. Whatever. The guy even knew that. My friend Chris Zelig, he even knew the name of those things to put on your glasses around, to put,
Is
and
a special word.
Yeah, you knew like, those like foam yellow things that you put on glasses to make them not fall off or something. And they were determined to do it, right? So I think I think it's similar, and Stephen Pressman obviously talks about this, the war of art, that there's resistance. Pressfield's right. Mm-hmm. He talks about that a lot, and so
I push that book more than anything, and I have yet to talk to him.
Oh wow. We met him when he came to James' podcast. Yeah.
Every time I have an artist on the podcast, whether they're a writer or a filmmaker, I tell them that this is like art life 101 shit. Like, you just got to read this book, have it on your bookshelf, reference it when you're in a funk. Let's.
What are some of the things you got out of it?
Just kind of like ways to command my emotional intelligence when things don't go according to plan, because nothing ever goes according to plan.
Right.
So like one of the things that I talked about on Monday with an author named Louis Rodding, whose podcast isn't coming out until April, but because April is National Poetry Month, and that's when I'm kind of stocking up writers for that. But I was telling her about how important it is, and we agreed that once you finish something, don't relish in it. Just move on to the next thing.
Right, 100%.
It's so important to move on to the next thing, because you'll find it much more difficult to get started again if you just kind of relish in it. And so, but there are other things, and there's small things like that. And it's hard to explain why the book is so helpful and useful, other than there are things about pursuing the arts that you're not going to be able to plan for, but you're going to need some sort of solid command of your emotional intelligence to be able to deal with. And this book is one of the many books out there that can help you do that. And I know, like, where I'm here with Steve Cohen selling other people's books.
No. I think that's great. You're kidding me? No. And I think that, I think it is very difficult to create art. I think you're 100% right. I recall Spike Lee, talking about creating any one of his movies. There's so many factors there that make it extremely difficult to do it, and you have to be very, very committed to doing it. And, Daniel Rudiger, who created the movie, the movie Rudy was about whether or not you think it's embellished or, he showed an amazing amount of determination to get onto the Notre Dame football team, but he also showed a similar amount of drive to get his film made. And he just approached people, and I just happened to be reading an article the other day, and they said something to the effect like getting a movie made is like having 39 or 40 tumblers fall into place. You need like a succession of tumblers like falling into place at the same time. Like or in succession, you need so many things to go right. Like you need to get the film studio to commit. You need to get the actor to commit. You need to get the budget. You need to, and I think there's a lot. And I remember reading, I think The Making of She's Gotta Have It by Spike Lee. And he just talked about all of those things that can go. It could rain one day, and you know, and or there's a myriad of things that can go wrong. And I think that brings me back to that speech I always like by Nick Saban, where it really helped me every once in a while. I'm sure we all have things that we lean on. The War of Art. I really like Nick Saban, who's won 7 national titles. I'm not a fan of the University of Alabama necessarily, but I think that he talked about how, you know, you're gonna have bad days, you're gonna have tough situations, and he talked about not letting your circumstance get in the way of your vision, you know, and he talked about his friend, the football coach, who's had cancer, and he said, my vision is to dance at my daughter's wedding. My circumstances, I have cancer. And he talked about not letting your circumstance, you know, get in the way of things, and you have your vision. And so big on that too, like how the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And I think that, you know, to come full circle, when I was in March and that stuff happened, I felt like, okay, you know, I'm going to focus on my vision, not my circumstance. And I'm going to focus on not making any better than it is, not any worse than it is, and just focus and recognize that I could be doing different things than I'm doing. Like it's, you know, and so could you. Like if you want to be successful, these are the things you have to do, and success leaves clues, and other people have done it. You know, and so for you, yes, I think it's important for you though to have a coterie of people around you who want you to do well, who want you to succeed, even in a world that people may not want you to succeed.
And that circles back to the tribe building.
Yes.
All right, last subject. So you're a big fan of quotes. You're always dropping quotes. When Amy was on the podcast, Amy Morin, author of 13 Things I Hate About You. No, 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. We were talking about your quotes.
Listen, thank you.
And just when I think I've heard your best quote, you drop something like you did today, the Moby Dick tartar sauce. That's one of those brilliant quotes that doesn't hit me until like a minute later. I'm like, wait a minute, that might be the smartest quote so far, or just saying. It's just a saying, but right.
It's funny because I kind of just always think it's just fun, and I don't want to be a self-parody, like, you know. But I think that it's funny because I was with my nephews a few weeks ago, and I was just telling them a story about when I was in college, because I always think I had a propensity to do this. And at the time, you know, and I think sometimes it's bravado, right? Like, you know, it's helped you, you know, just to kind of cut through. And, you know, and I remember when I was in college, I went to the University of Michigan, and I covered wrestling. And I had this friend who was a very, very good wrestler. Like, he was one of the best in the country. And, you know, and he wanted to wrestle the number 1 guy. He was like the number 2 guy for the Olympics in 1988. And I remember saying, I was like, okay, well, Mike Tyson and Holyfield got millions of dollars. What if we got promoters to give you guys $100,000? And this guy, John Fisher, who came from Flint, Michigan, you know, I was like, okay, why not? You know, I'll try. And so we called some boxing promoters, and I remember calling this boxing promoter, and I remember saying, hey, my name's Steve Cohen, and I was like in college at the time, and I was like, I represent John Fisher. Who? This guy, John Fisher, number 1 wrestler in the country, you know, 3-time All-American, 4-time, you know, Big Ten champ, and I don't know who he is. I said, okay, well, why don't I call Don King? He goes, okay, you know, tell me more, you know, and then I remember just having him on the phone and keeping him on the phone. He says like, well, Steve, if you think you can sell it, and I was like, dude, I can sell a pogo stick to a kangaroo. And he was like, I want to see your face. I want to see your face when you're telling me this story. And so you call up John Fisher, who wound up being an alternate on the Olympic team. Actually, it was 1992, the 1992 Olympic team. You know, and we drove into Detroit, and I felt like those guys from Revenge of the Nerds, when it was a tough area, and these were boxers, and it was a very cool situation for me. But I think, like, if I didn't have that bravado and didn't just, kind of like try and just say something funny or stick out, and it wouldn't have worked. But I think like you have to feel that way. You have to feel that way, and yeah. So I just always kind of learned that whole aspect of it,
Just when I thought you said the best one, you went around and you sold the pogo stick to a kangaroo. I think we should go out on that because that is brilliant. Thank you,
Okay,
Steve.
thank you very
All
much.
right.
Okay, good stuff. No, that's a true story.